Starting this broadcast with the latest coming in the Ukraine-Russia war. Ukraine's forces were reportedly fighting with Russian troops near the Kursk nuclear plant, and this comes as its incursion into Russian territory entered day 7. A top commander in the Ukraine military announced that they had captured 1,000 square kilometers of the region. The BBC reported on Sunday Russia was building new lines of defences close to the Kursk nuclear power plant, adding that forces had clashed around 30 miles away from the plant. The Ukrainian push towards the nuclear plant has drawn parallels with the Russian occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine. Russia captured the plant from Ukraine in the early days of the war, and the International Atomic Energy Agency has expressed fresh concerns over its security, with Ukraine and Russia blaming each other over a continuing fire near the plant.
Mr. President of Ukraine, Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief reporting. We continue the offensive operation on the territory of the Kursk region. Currently, we control about 1,000 square kilometers of the territory of the Russian Federation. The troops are fulfilling their assigned tasks. Battles are actually taking place along the entire front. The situation is under our control.
Putin has described the cross-border attack as a major provocation and said that it was aimed at improving Kiev's negotiating position. He has further demanded the Russian military to eject Ukrainian forces from Kursk and warned that Ukraine will get an appropriate response.
It appears that the enemy is aiming to improve its negotiating positions in the future. Well, what kind of negotiations can we even talk about with people who launch indiscriminate strikes on civilians, on civilian infrastructure, and try to create threats to nuclear energy facilities? What can you talk to them about?
And to take this further, we are being joined by Aris, joining us live from Berlin. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of the BNE Intelli-News and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. Mr. Aris, good to see you on WION. Thank you so much for taking out time. Let me start by asking you this. Are you seeing the latest developments as an invasion of Russia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Ukrainians have marched in with several thousand troops, their best troops, heavily armed and with mechanized support. So they're moving very quickly and they've taken a large amount of Russian territory. It's been a real shock for Russians in general that, you know, they haven't been invaded and seen their lands occupied since the Second World War. And Ukraine has the upper hand. It's caused absolute chaos. There was a mandatory evacuation order of 76,000 people from the region, but reports this morning saying that number's already up to 120,000 people. 10% of the whole region's population have fled the region to neighboring regions because of the fighting that's going on. And the AFU, the Armed Forces of Ukraine, are just sort of romping freely around the region. They claim to have taken 28 settlements and 1,000 kilometers of territory, as you said. The Russian side are saying it's actually 12 kilometers deep and 40 wide, which is 480 kilometers. But nevertheless, that's still more than the 350 they claim to have taken in the first day. And there's no sign of a coordinated Russia response yet. They're bringing troops up from the front line in Donbass. They're still on the way. They're being harried by Ukrainian forces as they approach. But it'll take time for them to dig in, and then we will almost definitely see a large Russian counterattack. So everything's sort of in limbo at the moment.
Right, you make an important point there. Kiev is also seeking a peace summit within 3 months and has urged Moscow to attend. So when you see thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, as you also mentioned, enter Russia, what do you make of that? Also, when the Russian president himself is saying that Kiev is trying to seek a better seat at the negotiating table.
Absolutely. So both sides have been signaling quite strongly that they're ready for talks. I mean, Putin said it several times. He even offered a ceasefire on the eve of the Swiss summit in July. And said that, you know, he'd freeze the conflict along existing lines. At the same time, Zelensky's backed off from his maximalist position, which was that no talks could even begin until all Russian troops left Ukraine's territory, including Crimea. And now he's been talking about having a referendum to ask the Ukrainian people for permission to concede territory if that's necessary. And it's widely expected it will be necessary. And he's also called for a second peace summit in November. But to this one, specifically, China and Russia will be invited. They didn't attend the previous one in Switzerland. And so everything's being lined up for a serious attempt at ceasefire talks. But as you reported, I mean, Putin has taken a hard line because what Ukrainians have done is they've given themselves a territory card to play in this game, and they can go into those negotiations and say, look, we'll swap you Kursk for one of the 4 regions you annexed, or the land bridge that runs from Rostov down to Crimea. And Putin's taking the line like, why should I even start that conversation if you still hold Kursk? You know, we need to eject you first. And there can be no talks while Ukrainian troops are occupying Russian territory. So it's fraught. I mean, on the Ukrainian side, you can see why they would want to try and get this territorial card. But on the Russian side, you can see why they won't want to start talks while Kursk is still occupied.
All right, Mr. Aris, thank you so much for joining us and getting us all your insights.
Pleasure.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.